from all the everything you learned from all the screw ups you've had in the past. And if you haven't lived long enough to have screw ups, you aren't very wise.
Go.
You ready? Okay. Hi, my name is Keith Artz, and I'm live in Cove West 304. Been here for about 2 years, and my daughter calls me a turd, which stands for treatment resistant depression, which is one of the hardest ones to take care of because I don't respond to most medications. I'll get into that a little bit later. And there are two words that I use in this lecture that you may not understand. One is called unsad, which is between happy and unhappy. There's got to be something in between there because it's a big gulf otherwise. And the other one is we the wise, which means us old farts. I'm sorry, us older people who have been around long enough to have a little bit of wisdom. But rather than saying, because we're old, we do this, I just say, because we're wise, we do this. That's just, okay? All right. So with those two terms, I wanted to give this lecture because of the conditions that we find ourselves in. First of all, we are the wise. We have begun to experience the loss of our tribe, the friends that we had as younger people. And my mother-in-law was the last of her tribe, and it made a big deal. It was a big problem with her. They had a group of 6 friends that they did everything together with, and she was the last one alive. And she has a small family, and so her loved ones basically started falling away from her, and that sum of that loss is can be devastating. That, and with the COVID restrictions of not being able to see your family, not to have family come in. I haven't seen my grandsons for 6 months, and to not to be able to come into your house, even into your building, and to the threat of getting the virus always on your shoulders, or every time you go outside or anything. All of those things add up to the possibility of going into a depression of some sort, one type or another. And the one thing that I really want to stress is that depression, sadness, loneliness, and those types of things are not character flaws. It's not your fault. It's a chemical imbalance, just like diabetes is. With diabetes, your body doesn't make the insulin that it needs to stay regulated. Well, with depression, your body isn't creating brain chemicals that allow the electric connections to go through. Consequently, you're in a constant state of sadness. There's no pleasure anywhere. And so it's a strange thing to be talking about with a bunch of friends, but I'm hoping that you will take it as it's intended, and that is a way to help. So to give you an idea of what my qualifications are for making the presentation, and I'm going to be reading part of this because I had this thing prepared a year ago before COVID hit, and I was the last one on the docket, and they had to cancel it because of COVID. So I've been sitting on this thing for a full year now, and haven't had a real chance to go through and get it all in my head. So I'll be reading part of it if you don't mind. So let's see. Like I said, I was diagnosed with depression in 1988, and that was 32 or 33 years ago. I was 49 at the time, 48, something like that. And since then, I've been on and off of 24 different antidepressant medications, which is one hell of a roller coaster because it takes 2 weeks to get on to a full dose. You have to wait 2 weeks before you find out whether it's going to work. If it doesn't, it takes 2 weeks to taper off, 2 weeks to taper back onto a new one. So it's just an up and down all the time. So 24 different medications. Two of them worked for a while on me, and I was unsad for a while, which was a great pleasure, I tell you, to be unsad rather than depressed. But they failed me after, one of them lasted for 3 years, the other one lasted for about 6, and then nothing after that. And I've had over 50 electroshock treatments, which was didn't do me much good at all. They did in the short term, but not in the long term. I've had, let's see, 35 deep brain magnetic stimulation treatments, which is they have a thing that feels like that for 30 minutes. And it's a magnet that sends magnetic waves through your brain. And that worked for about 3 weeks, and then it stopped also. So, and I spent 5 different 2 to 3 week periods in psych wards throughout the city of Seattle because I was very suicidal at the time. The last one that I was in, they had tried almost all the medications that they had available, and I was pretty desperate. They finally decided to put me on one that was developed in the 1950s, which was originally designed for something else, and they found out they were testing 2 different medications for this. I don't know, I think it was, I can't remember what the disease was, but one of them worked fairly well and the other one didn't work at all on that, but everybody was a lot happier. So they decided to use it as a antidepressant, and it was very successful. But after a while, they started losing all their patients to stroke. And so they stopped using it. And then that was in the 50s. In the 60s and 70s, they looked at it again and figured out that it was not the medication, but a food interaction that caused the problem. When food is in the state of decay, such as too ripe of fruit or aged cheese, aged meat, soy sauce, and certain vegetables and fruits have it naturally. If I get too much of that in my system at the same time, it'll spike my blood pressure and I can have a stroke. So it's called the cheese factor. So there are only 2 cheeses I can eat, and they're both very bland and have no flavor, so I don't eat much of it. But the ones I really like are verboten. Anyway, so I've changed my diet completely and don't eat any of those things. And I'm doing fine. I'm doing well. I'm happy, as a matter of fact. I'm happier now than I've been in 35 years. So it's wonderful. So let's see. Some of you are maybe wondering, why are you airing your dirty laundry in front of a bunch of people you don't even know? And my reaction is, it's not dirty laundry any more than diabetes is dirty laundry. I have one of the first questions my psychiatrist asked me back in 1988 is there any history of depression in your family? And I said, well, not that I've ever heard. He said, well, ask. So I asked my parents. My mother said, well, yeah, there is. Her grandmother on her father's side died in a mental institution in 1928 from mania, and whatever that was the cause of death. And I don't know what that meant at that time. I know what it means now, but she had 2 uncles. One of them died of strychnine poisoning, self-inflicted, and the other one died of a gunshot wound, self-inflicted. Her father, my grandfather, died of a heart attack on the electroshock table in 1940, I'm sorry, 2 years before I was born. So I'd say there tends to be a history, and I think it just skips a generation. My mother's family, my mother and her brother didn't experience it. I and my daughters have. So I don't know. I decided that a history needs to be told, because if I had known about it ahead of time, known what to look for ahead of time, I could have gotten help earlier than I did, and I may not have become a turd. I may have just been hard to treat. So I made it my duty to talk about depression and to emphasize that it is not a character flaw, as much as I possibly can to people who will listen, because it's very important. And I think there's things that anybody that suspects their neighbor or their loved one or themselves has it, there's things that they can do to nip it in the bud. So, and some people will say, well, you know, who haven't experienced it, just say, well, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get on with life. Well, that's like telling a woman who just lost a child, oh, don't worry about it, you can always have another one. It's the same thing. There are no bootstraps, and there's no getting over a death child. So I've tried to describe to my daughters and my wife what it is like from the inside when I was in the depths of the depression, because they couldn't understand why I would be sitting at the breakfast table and everything would be fine, and I'd just start crying for no reason, absolutely no reason in their mind, and how I would go days without speaking, or couldn't get out of bed, or have work that needed to be done, like water coming in the basement, and not having the energy to go down and see what the problem was, let alone fix it. So I worked on it quite a bit to try and describe what it would be like in ways that you could understand. And there are different, you know, all the negative things that you can think of about life. Loneliness, and I don't mean just being alone, I mean loneliness in a crowd of friends and loved ones. So I'm going to give you a little, just a little 4 or 5 line situation to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. First of all, is loneliness. Pretend that you're away from your parents' home for the first time, whether it's a Girl Scout, Boy Scout camp, or church camp, or boot camp, or whatever, and you can't make a phone call for the first 3 days. You don't know anybody there. You don't want to know anybody there. You're homesick. You want to go home, and you can't. And you're surrounded by people every day, but you are lonely, very, very lonely. Number 2 is hopelessness. From your vantage point, you can see a full school bus and a fast-moving semi-truck about to collide at an intersection. They can't see each other, and you can't warn them. You know that you know what the possibilities are for the people that are in the bus, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's how hopeless the situation is. And there's uselessness. You have 2 broken legs and you can't walk. Good friends are trapped under a collapsed building, and there aren't enough rescue workers to do all the work that needs to be done. Unable to move your legs, you can only watch as your friend screams for help. You're totally useless. Fatigue. You've stayed up for 72 hours to study for finals using coffee and no-dos, like breakfast food, to keep you awake. When finals are over, you finally have a chance to sleep, but the students in the next room are celebrating a very loud party, and the fatigue you feel is worse than you've ever experienced in your life. Sadness. You lost your mother, a sibling, or a child that you love very much. The sudden accident caught you off guard and left you unprepared for the weighty loss. The deep sadness you feel is all-consuming and relentless. Then there's brain fog, or COVID fog, or the mist, or whatever you want to call it. Your thinking process is not linear. It's random and circular, taking away your ability to solve once easy problems, or to remember an event in a chronological way, and preventing you from holding down a paying job. When I was depressed, I was still at work, and I worked all day on a 3 paragraphs letter, just a simple letter. When I came back the next day, I asked them if they'd gone out, and the secretary said, well, we had to rewrite it. We couldn't read it. So that was the fog. Low self-worth. Sex as an activity is seldom possible for men with depression. Neither the desire nor the ability to perform is ever even remotely possible. The feeling of shame and low self-worth just piles on to the depression. I'd like to give an example from a woman's point of view, but I ain't been there, so I can't. Guilt. You did something illegally, and you didn't speak up when your best friend was blamed for the crime. You said nothing, and he got punished. The guilt is so strong that it too damages your self-esteem. Any one of these pains is difficult to endure by itself, but to live with all of them at the same time, all day, every day, for a period of years, is the pain that I'm talking about. At times, sorry. At times, I even felt that suicide was a rational option when I could no longer endure the relentless pain of it all. I did not follow through with these plans, but unfortunately, many others do, thinking that death is better than spending a life in such misery. This is the pain of depression that I speak of, the pain that I hope you can try to understand so that you can realize that depression is a real disease and not a character flaw. I've survived the disease with lots of help, love, and the right medication. It re-enters my life periodically, but now I know the warning signs and I can do something about it before it gets too bad. So that's my experience. Sorry. So there are different degrees of depression. Sometimes it's just, oh, I don't want to get out of bed today type of thing. And others where it's just all consuming. But they're diagnosed by a combination of the symptoms and the duration of those symptoms. And the more you have for the longer period of time, the worse you are. So I'm going to give you an idea of what the major symptoms are. And in words, I hope that you can understand. One is, it's called depressed mood, where you're sad, empty, or hopeless. Number two is the interest and pleasure is not there. There's no interest and pleasure in things that were once pleasurable, such as dancing or singing to yourself or listening to music or doing crochet or whatever. Things that used to be pleasurable are no longer of interest. An increase or a decrease in appetite. I thought, wow, I might be able to lose some weight. No, I put on 38 pounds. been on Weight Watchers ever since and back down to where I was. Insomnia, and that's the big one for me. If I don't get 7 hours of sleep a night, I am on my way downhill. So I have to be very careful about that. Restlessness, or the feeling of being slowed down, where you kind of shuffle instead of walk. You plan things so that if I have to get up out of the chair, I want to make sure I get this, and this done, so I don't have to get up more than once, type of a thing. Energy and fatigue and no energy. You all know what that is. Worthlessness or inappropriate guilt, which is inappropriate guilt sounds funny, but most guilt really is inappropriate. Low concentration or indecisiveness. And it's hard to tell when you have COVID brain and when it's depression brain. So, but they're both the same. They really are. You can't think things through, and you have to, but you're afraid of the results. That's me. And then on top of all that is possible suicidal thoughts. And that doesn't just mean, well, I'm going to go out and kill myself. It means that I found myself driving across a floating bridge and thinking, if I just take a sharp right here, I'd be in the water and that'd be it. Or, oh, look, there's a big tree right by the road. I could run into that. And, or to the point of saying, God, I am just so tired. I just wish I wasn't here anymore. That is the suicidal thought. Very mild, but it's the beginning. So even those are things to listen to. The duration that they speak of is anything from 2 weeks on. And so if you've had these experiences all day, every day for 2 weeks, you should do something. Sometimes it only lasts for a few days and you're okay, probably. So there's another factor that goes along with it, and it's generalized anxiety or worry about things that you have no control over. I was worried about what happens if this last medication doesn't work. There aren't any others. What do I do? And I worried and worried and worried about that. And finally, I came to the conclusion, if I keep doing that, I'm going to be depressed again. So I had to take that step when I get there. So we, the wise, have to be very more careful, I believe, than most people, because of the problems that we have related to loss of friends, no family being able to see us, and all those things I mentioned before. So after going through all this blathering that I've been doing, we now come to the main purpose of my presentation, and that is answering the question of what can be done. What do we do? Well, the answer is simple, but the execution may be a little more difficult. The finding the problem, first of all, is even with the simple understanding that I've given you on what it's like, you may already notice some symptoms in yourself and others that may be in front of you now, like a mood change, listlessness, being non-communicative, no incentive. I call it down in the dumpness. It's another word of mine. You know, and it's easier to see these things in other people than it is to see it in yourself. So my thought is that we need to take care of each other, because a lot of times we can't take care of ourselves. When I was depressed really bad, my wife could tell when I was unsad. My wife could tell a month ahead of time that I was going downhill before I even noticed it myself. She'd say, "Are you feeling okay?" I said, "Yeah." "Don't I look it?" She says, "No, you're slipping." I said, "Well, what do you see?" And she said, "Well, you aren't smiling, you aren't talking, and there's no sparkle in your eyes." I go to the mirror and I look at myself. I don't see what she sees. But sure enough, a month later, I'd be down in the dumps again. So it's hard for us to see it in ourselves, because we look in the mirror every day and we see such a gradual change that it's not a change. And so my thought is, for us to take care of others here in the Hearthstone, is that if you would call your neighbors, and I don't mean to single out people who are married, but in particular those that are living alone, because we don't get the hugs, we don't get the touch that married couples do. And to me, that's a big thing. But if you were to call your neighbor and just chat with them and listen to the tone of their voice as to what they're saying, not exactly what they're saying, but how they're saying it. Is it flat, no emotion? Is it slower than normal? And things like that. Do they not laugh when they would normally laugh and you tell a joke? Except when Dave tells it, and Dave tells it, it's never really funny anyway, but I do it just for his sake. So And I recommend that you don't start the conversation by saying, "Hi, Dave, how are you?" Because that, in our society, we say, "How are you?" when we really don't mean it. We just say, "I want to start a conversation with you." And the only thing I know what to say is, "How are you?" But I really don't care, or I really don't want to know, because it may be too much for me. And when you're depressed and someone says, "How are you?" you have to make a decision. Do they really want to know? Do I really want to talk? Or should I just say, "Fine"? And usually it's, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you?" So my suggestion is you call them up and you say, "Hi, Dave, I was just thinking about you. I thought I'd give you a call." Period. You've sent the message you want to say. I'm thinking about you. I care about you. Then if Dave wants to talk to me about it, he will. If he doesn't, at the end of the conversation, you sent your message, you got the conversation started, and it's up to him to respond. And if you do it that way and they'll start to talk, don't give advice. Just listen. Just listen. If they want advice, they'll ask you. And if they do, then if you have an answer, give it. Otherwise, you say, "I don't know, but I think I know somebody you can talk to." And I'll give you those a little bit later. But so that if you were to contact your neighbors, and don't just do it once, do it periodically. Like, I haven't heard my roommate or my person next door, Dora. I haven't seen her for a week. I called her and say, "Hi, Dora, I hadn't heard from you. I thought I'd give you a call." "Oh, well, I really appreciate that." And she was just very thankful that somebody was checking up on her. She was fine, but I didn't know that. Anyway, so if you find out that, if you suspect that there's a problem, that someone is down and not doing well or whatever, you don't have to do anything other than to call Chio King, who is the social worker here at Hearthstone, and Alan will put up her number and a couple of other numbers for you at the end of this presentation. You call her and just say, "I talked to so-and-so, and I don't know, I'm not sure if they're doing too well. Would you mind checking?" And she will call them or go to see them and do a mild assessment. And then she can determine whether more help is needed or whether they just need a hug at that time or whatever. But leave it to her to do that. Or Ann Thomas. Ann is the chaplain for Hearthstone, and she's had training in counseling also. And you may be more comfortable talking to her rather. Then there is yourself. How do you assess yourself? That is hard. It's really hard. So if you take these where are they? The symptoms that I talked about, and try to do a real life assessment, a real honest assessment of yourself. Do it by yourself so that you don't have to tip anybody else off that you're not feeling well or whatever. And if you think that there's a problem, you can call Chio or Ann, or if you're contemplating suicide, there's also a number for the King County Crisis Clinic, and they have the best reputation of any of them. The crisis clinic was started here in Seattle, and it's now international. So they can talk people out of suicide and get help for them. So, let's see, I think that's, I said, oh, there, area. Yes, thank you. There are the numbers for the Chio King and Ann Thomas and the King County Crisis Clinic. That if you write those down and spread them around freely. Just to remember that it's not okay to feel sad for days on end. Feeling down, sad, or melancholy is not your fault. So it's a chemical imbalance that can be reversed. And there are, let's see, I think that's about it. That's pretty much what I had to say. I'm pleased to answer any questions you have about anything, whether it's related to me or depression or the man in the moon. I don't care. I'm very open and very honest as I can be. So have at it. Anybody have any questions? I think I'm not sure how Alan wants to handle this, whether you have to go into the chat room and type it out or whether we'll do it verbally. I don't know. We'll leave it to him.
I have a question. I'm Bev Larson over at Lakeside.
Yes.
You said that yours started when you were in your 40s.
Yes.
But I'm hearing about young people, high school kids during this COVID time. And it was kind of interesting because I was talking to Karen Erlander, and Karen said that she grew up, her mom died, she lived with her dad in kind of a rural community. And she said, I was alone a lot and I got used to that. But the kids now are so connected all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when they can't see each other and be with each other, there were 4 suicides in the Edmond School District during this last year.
Right. Yeah, the depression starts earlier than, you know, I was kind of a late bloomer, I guess. Yeah. Depression is usually during and shortly after puberty is a primary time period, and then it decreases. It's not unlikely for it to happen in later life because of the situation changes. You know, we've seen a lot more than the younger crowd, but I think also that we are no longer hopefully being bullied as much as the younger kids are, either through cyberspace or otherwise. And we already have our identity. We don't have to try and find it out. And when you can't find your identity in yourself, you know, you automatically are alone. And but I think the midlife crisis that people talk about, mine came at 48, and I'm still in it, so to speak. I've gotten used to it. But you're right. I also think that I don't know that we can totally blame the internet and social media, because they were doing that before COVID, and you couldn't even get a telephone out of their hands. And but now they're probably on it more than ever, if that's possible. And who knows what's going on those chat room rooms, you know. Be nice to be able to blame it on something like that, but in fact, I think it's more insidious than that.
Keith, I have a question.
Yes.
Teresa Atkinson here. So you're so very talented with your art, and I know you used to make furniture. So were you able to continue doing those creative things when you were so depressed?
You know, I appreciate that question, because one of the problems that I have is that I'm very right-brained, and the right brain is the creative side, and the left brain is the analytical side. And I am more right-brained than I am left-brained. We live in a left-brain world, however. And my psychiatrist said, you are under stress all the time, daily, because you have to adapt daily to the left-brain world that you are not comfortable in. I tried to stay active in the creative side of my brain because I didn't want to go over the other. I couldn't go the other side. I didn't know how. I didn't know how to do it. And but the fatigue and the no incentive to do anything is actually doing the painting is okay. It's coming up with the idea and getting it all composed and everything. That there's some left brain function to that. And so coming up with an idea is always very difficult. And so when my wife had first of all, she had chronic lymphocytic leukemia for 20 years. And what they used to put that to bed caused ovarian cancer, which she died of. And so when I came time for me to work on something, I started thinking I'm going to do something in a series. So that's the paintings that I have out in the lobby here on the 3rd floor of the Cove are things that I did there. And they're all 12 teapots and 12 teacups. I knew what they were going to be. So I didn't, when I finished one, I didn't have to come up with anything new. I just grab a new cup and do that. So it is some people, some artists, I think, thrive best when they are under stress like this. I didn't. It was very difficult for me, which just added to the self-worth, damaging the self-worth because I can't even do that, but I do best. So anyway, it's an interesting concept that the right brain, left brain is in a concept. And as it turns out, my wife is very left brain. So anyway.
Thank you, Keith.
Anybody else have any questions?
Well, thank you for sharing, that's for sure.
Oh, you bet. You bet. Yeah.
Keith,
And
I was, excuse me.
go ahead, David.
I was going to ask you a similar question to that one. It seems like activity of any kind would be the hardest. It might be good for you, but it would be the hardest thing to do. But there's your art or your work or activities like making music or exercising, walking, running, whatever. Is it just, I mean, would those things be good for you in general? And well, I guess I'm not quite sure what my question is.
Well, the answer is yes, they would be good for me if I had the energy to do them, and getting initiating anything at all is very, very hard.
Right.
And that means getting out of bed. That means I wanted to say in the presentation that when you're calling people, don't expect them to call you back if they're depressed, because that telephone weighs 10,000 pounds. And for me to initiate a call is just almost impossible.
Yeah.
So it's the same way here. I got Green Lake right across the street where I can walk all I want. And some days I just can't even do it. I just can't do it. So yes, it just dulls that part of your being. And the more it does that, the worse you feel. So it's a vicious cycle, really.
Yeah.
By the way, David, I've tried learning a recorder again, and I sound like I did when I started back when I was 50 years old and first started playing, 45 years old and first started playing, and I can't play anymore. I think I lost all of that ability with the 50 electro shock treatments.
Oh,
Yeah, so I was so excited about having you here. We can play again together, but you don't even want to hear me practice now, I tell
you
you.
don't hear me play.
Okay, anybody else?
Keith, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
This is Dave. I'm at the Cove. I always have had a hard time telling jokes. I keep forgetting the punchline. Maybe that's why you have a hard time laughing. No, I was going to bring up your cause, the love, which is opening the the shop over at the Lakeside building, which is theoretically available for people to be able to use.
Right.
Been shut down now for a year or longer. And it's been your desire to try and get in and use the shop for some of your excellent woodworking. Were you looking at that as part of a solution, or is it just your desire? Does it have anything to do with your depression, or?
To a certain extent, you know, when I left my 5-bedroom house was on a third of an acre with a art studio that was really a two-stall garage into a 1-bedroom where my paint studio takes up more room than my bed does in the same room. To keep my hands into those things that I love to do so much, such as woodworking and painting and needlework, knitting, crocheting, I'm sorry, counter cross stitch and things like that. I have to do that. I'm almost obsessive compulsive to do things with my hands all the time, even when I'm watching TV. And so being able to, and I made all the furniture that I have in my house here. And it's to stay involved in that. It's like use it or lose it, you know, I forget how, and I don't want to forget how. And so I had some things that I wanted to get done in the wood shop, and I wanted to make sure that anybody who wanted to use it could, if they signed a release form and got checked out on the safety features of the machines and so on. So it's available for anybody who wants to use it.
Thanks.
So go ahead.
Thanks to you.
Well, someday I'll tell you how I did it, but
Whatever it took, it's a good thing.
yeah. Next is getting that the art studio open over in the Cove East, and
Yes.
they're slowly running out of ideas of how to keep us out of there, because as soon as we can get together, 4 of us in a room without masks, I'm on their case. So anyway,
Thanks for your impatience.
I saw Jim Mertz in the lobby downstairs yesterday, and he said, "Well, Keith, you staying out of trouble?" And I said, "Oh God, don't do that to me." And he said, "Yeah." I said, "That's a part of my personality." He says, "Yeah, I know." So,
Well, you took
Anyway.
your painting away from him.
what's that?
You took your painting away from him.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions of any kind?
Yes, I have, this is Claire.
Yes.
Can you hear me? I have a friend who has been experiencing this is hard depression. And I'm just wondering, she lives in Port Townsend. And I was thinking I'd like to go over there. And this has been going on for a number of years, and she's tried different medications, and she's on a medication that is starting to fail now. But so if I go over there and, you know, and not ask how are you, but just I'd love to spend some time together. I guess she'll tell me if she doesn't want to, but I just thought, you know, going for a walk on the beach or something. Or
You bet. You know,
How
it's
is it?
easier. It's easier to go out and do something with someone else rather than doing it by yourself. But if she says, "No, I don't want to go," don't try to pressure her, but just let her know that you're willing, and just, "I want to spend some time with you," sends the message you're trying to send, and that is, "I love you."
yes,
So you have to leave it to her to respond to it, but she's not going to respond if you don't ask.
yeah,
Because
oh, that is,
So my suggestion is call her and say, I'd love to see, I'd like to come up and visit with you for a while, and maybe we can go for a walk on the beach or something like that. But don't give her more than one option. Start saying, walk on the beach or go do this or do this or do this. And the answer is going to be, no, I don't want to do any of those.
Yeah, it's too much to choose, to decide.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Well, that's very helpful. I really appreciate your candidness, and
You bet.
I've been taking notes because I feel like it's really, you're very clear, and it feels like this is going to be very useful for me. So thank you.
Good. If anybody wants to talk to me on the telephone or in person at any time, I'd be more than happy to do that. So my name's in the directory there. ARTZ, which the only name I know that starts with A and ends with Z and comes in alphabetical order, and it looks like an eye chart. So call me at any time. I'd be happy to talk to you and maybe give you some ideas or whatever.
Yeah,
Hi, Marcia.
Hi, how are you?
And I just want to break in and thank you, Keith, for being so open and like they said, so clear and providing so much help. I sent the numbers along in the chat to everybody. And it was so helpful, and also your oral history as well was really touching. So this is going to be a hard act to follow for the next person. So
Oh, I
let's.
do a tap dance.
I'll have a round of
dazzle
applause
everybody.
for Keith, please. Can we, please?
Yes.
We'll join you,
thank
won't
you.
we, Therese?
What's that?
I said, we'll join you, won't we, Therese?
Yes, we'll tap in the tap dance, you bet.
Okay, great. I do a marvelous imitation of a tap dancer. It's a
Okay,
very
great.
imitation,
forward.
I say.
We can be the hero.
Thank you, Keith, so much.
You're welcome. Okay,
Please.
Thank
get
you
out there
so
and call your neighbors.
Thank you. Good reminder.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
take care,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.